Ah, welcome, my dear. I see the rain has come again tonight, soft and steady, like an old friend tapping gently at the window pane. Come, sit beside Grandpa, wrap yourself warm, and listen close. Tonight's story is one that begins long, long ago, in a quiet valley where the hills cradled a small village hidden from the busy world. In this village, on the farthest edge, where the fields gave way to forest, there stood a garden like no other, a place the villagers called the Garden of Forgotten Wishes. The garden was not grand, nor was it tended with careful hands. No, its magic lay in its wildness. Tangled vines climbed broken stone walls, and blossoms of every color spilled over pathways of moss and earth. Flowers grew in patterns only the wind seemed to understand, and in the heart of the garden stood an ancient tree, its bark silvered with age, its branches stretching wide like arms, ready to gather every secret the world wished to tell. Few dared enter the garden, for it was said to belong to no one and everyone at once. It was a place where lost dreams and whispered hopes took root, where wishes, forgotten by those who made them, bloomed quietly, waiting to be found again. And in this village there lived a boy named Corin. Corin was quiet, a dreamer with eyes like the sky after rain, soft and searching. He had grown up hearing the stories of the garden, of how people long ago would leave their wishes at the ancient tree's roots, hoping one day they might come true. But as the years passed and the world grew busier, fewer people visited, and many forgot the promises they had made beneath its boughs. Yet Corin never forgot. Every evening, as the stars pricked the sky and the air cooled with night's breath, he would stand at the garden's gate looking in, wondering what wishes lay sleeping beneath the petals and leaves. One such night, when the rain fell light and the village lights flickered like fireflies in the mist, Corin made a choice. He would step through the garden's gate. He would seek the ancient tree, and he would listen, not to the world's clamor, but to the quiet voices of forgotten dreams. For he believed with all his heart that no true wish ever fades. It only waits for someone to remember. The rain fell soft as a sigh, draping the garden in a veil of silver mist, and Corin, with a heart both nervous and eager, stepped through the creaking wooden gate. The moment he crossed the threshold, it was as though the world behind him faded. No more the distant hum of the village, no more the glow of windows or the crackle of hearth fires. Only the garden remained, alive with the scent of wet earth and wild blossoms, and the sound of raindrops pattering on leaves like 1,000 tiny drums. Corin paused, taking it all in. The path before him was narrow, woven from moss and stone, its edges softened by ferns and trailing ivy. Petals of every hue glistened in the moonlight, their faces turned upward as if drinking the rain. The air felt thick with secrets, with the weight of hopes long laid to rest beneath the soil. Step by step, Corin made his way deeper into the garden. The further he walked, the more the plants seemed to lean toward him, as if curious, as if they remembered. Here a rose grew where no rose should bloom, its petals the deep blue of twilight. There a cluster of tiny white flowers shimmered like stars fallen to earth. He could almost hear them whisper, soft wordless songs carried on the breeze. And always ahead, the ancient tree called to him. Its silvered bark gleamed through the mist, and its branches arched high, cradling the night sky. At its base, roots twisted and coiled like the threads of a forgotten tapestry, sheltering patches of grass where old tokens lay hidden. A ribbon faded with time, a stone carved with a single word, a locket long rusted shut. Corin felt the garden's magic wrap around him, not a magic of spells or sorcery, but the gentler magic of memory, of longing, of promises made in moments of hope or sorrow. And as he reached the tree at last, standing beneath its great canopy, he knew that every flower, every blade of grass, every drop of rain here had once been part of someone's wish. He knelt at the roots, resting his hand upon the cool, damp bark, and closed his eyes. The garden's quiet filled him, and for the first time he felt not small or lost, but part of something vast and beautiful, a keeper of forgotten dreams. Corin stayed kneeling at the base of the ancient tree, his fingers brushing the gnarled roots as if they were the lines of a long-lost map, leading him deeper into the heart of the garden's secrets. The rain, still gentle, tapped upon the leaves above like a soft drumbeat, steady and calming. The world felt far away now. Only the garden's hush remained, and the quiet strength of the tree that had stood watch over so many dreams. As Corin let his hand rest against the bark, a warmth seemed to rise from the wood, not in heat, but in memory, as though the tree itself was glad for his touch, for his listening heart. He leaned closer, closing his eyes, and in that moment it was as if the garden whispered to him, not with words, but with the soft sigh of wind, the rustle of leaves, and the gentle song of raindrops. And then beneath the roots where his hand lay, Corin felt something small, something smooth. Carefully, he brushed away damp moss and crumbled earth, uncovering a stone no bigger than his palm. It was polished by time, its edges worn soft, and upon its surface was carved a single symbol, a heart cradled within the curve of a crescent moon. The stone pulsed with quiet meaning, as if it had waited for his hand, for his noticing, for his kindness. Corin turned it over, and there, faint but clear, were words etched by a hand that must have trembled with hope for her safe return. His breath caught. This was no small wish. This was the wish of someone who had stood beneath this very tree, heart aching, eyes full of tears, and offered their longing to the garden, trusting it would listen. Corin's mind filled with questions. Who had made this wish? Had they stood here beneath the same rain, beneath the same branches that now sheltered him? Had they come seeking solace, just as he had? And most of all, who was her? The garden felt different now, alive with a new purpose, as if it, too, wished him to know the story behind the forgotten plea. Holding the stone close, Corin stood and gazed out over the tangle of blossoms, vines, and mist beyond. The garden of forgotten wishes was asking something of him, not just to remember, but to help fulfill the promise left in its care so long ago. With the stone clutched gently in his hand, Corin stepped back from the ancient tree, feeling the weight of the wish settle over him, not heavy like a burden, but steady like a promise he had silently agreed to keep. The garden, with its wild beauty and quiet magic, seemed to lean in closer, its leaves trembling softly in the rain, as if listening, as if waiting to see what he would do next. Corin looked around at the tangled paths, the archways of vines, the pools where raindrops gathered and reflected the pale moonlight. Somewhere within this living labyrinth, he felt sure, lay the pieces of the story behind the wish carved upon the stone. The garden, he sensed, did not simply guard forgotten hopes. It offered those with kind hearts a chance to help those hopes bloom again. The rain, soft and steady, wrapped him in its song, as he began to walk, guided not by any map, but by instinct, by the subtle pull of the garden's magic. Each step led him deeper, past flowers that opened shyly at his passing, past ferns that brushed his hands like old friends. He paused often, listening, not for voices, but for the language of the garden, the sigh of wind through branches, the ripple of water in hidden streams, the faint hum of the earth beneath his feet. And slowly, the garden began to show him signs. At first, small things, a petal shaped like a crescent moon, a patch of moss in the shape of a heart, a stone worn smooth as if by countless fingers. They marked the way, subtle yet certain, guiding him toward a part of the garden where even the bravest villagers rarely dared to wander. And then, through the curtain of rain and mist, Corin saw it, a clearing unlike any he had passed before. At its center stood a statue, worn by time and covered in ivy, its features soft with age, but still noble. It was of a woman cloaked in flowing robes, her hands outstretched as if reaching for someone unseen, her face tilted skyward, eyes carved with longing. Around her feet, the flowers grew in wild profusion, moonflowers that glowed faintly in the dark, and tiny blooms shaped like stars. Corin stepped closer, heart beating with wonder, and as he did, the rain eased to a drizzle, as if the sky itself wished to witness what would come next. He knelt before the statue, placing the stone at its base, and whispered, "I will find her. I will see this wish kept." And though no voice answered, the garden's hush felt deeper, as though in that moment it had accepted his vow. The drizzle softened into a fine mist that clung gently to Corin's hair and cloak, beating on the petals of the moonflowers and leaving the air thick with the scent of rain and earth. The statue before him seemed almost alive in that soft light, as if the stone woman's sorrow and hope still lingered in the garden's breath. Corin sat back on his heels, his fingers tracing the moss-covered base of the statue. There, hidden beneath layers of lichen and ivy, he felt something rougher than stone, a mark, carved deep and long forgotten. With patient care, he began to pull the ivy away, its tendrils clinging as if reluctant to release the secret they'd guarded for so long. The garden was silent, but for the soft drip of rain from leaf to leaf, as if it, too, was holding its breath. Bit by bit, the carving emerged, a name, though worn and faded, still legible beneath Corin's careful hands. Elia. The letters were simple, but in that name was a world of story, a key to the wish etched upon the stone he carried. Elia, the woman for whom someone long ago had begged the garden to guide home. Corin spoke the name aloud, softly, as though speaking to the statue itself, and as he did, the wind stirred the branches above, sending a cascade of silvered raindrops down upon him like a blessing. He looked up at the statue's face, seeing not just stone now, but the echo of the woman Elia must have been, a figure of grace, of strength, of longing that had reached across the years. But it wasn't just the name he uncovered. As the ivy fell away, Corin saw that beneath the statue's outstretched hands lay a hollow hidden deep within the base. There, tucked safely out of sight, was a small bundle wrapped in cloth so old it crumbled at his touch. Within it lay a single delicate comb, carved from bone, adorned with tiny stars and crescent moons, and a scrap of parchment, the ink faded but still readable. For my Elia, may the garden guide her home if I cannot. Corin's heart ached at the words, the quiet love and hope that had been left here and trusted to the garden's care. He felt as if the garden itself was sharing its most precious memory with him, trusting him to carry it forward. With new purpose, Corin stood, the comb and parchment cradled in his hands, the stone tucked safely at his side. The garden's path stretched before him, waiting. The story was no longer forgotten, and he knew that somewhere in the garden's hidden corners or beyond, the wish's answer waited to be found. The mist thickened as Corin moved deeper into the garden. The silvered world around him hushed and dreamlike, as if the air itself held its breath, watching. The comb and parchment were warm in his hands, not from heat, but from the weight of the promise they carried. With every step, Corin felt more certain the garden was guiding him, not with words, but with subtle signs only a heart attuned to hope could see. The path narrowed, overgrown with moss and tiny blossoms that glowed faintly in the dim light, their petals opening to the soft rain like stars answering the night. Above him, branches arched low, dripping with moisture, forming a tunnel of green and silver that seemed to draw him onward, ever onward. At a fork in the path, where an ancient stone bench sat crumbling beneath a tangle of ivy, Corin paused. There, beneath the bench, lay something unexpected. A small wooden charm shaped like a bird in flight, its wings outstretched as if forever caught mid-soar. He bent to pick it up, brushing away the damp leaves that clung to it. The wood was weathered smooth, but upon closer look, he saw tiny carvings along its wings, symbols like those etched into the comb, stars, moons, a trail of dots that might have been meant to mark a path or perhaps a journey. Corin turned the charm over in his hands, feeling its quiet message. The garden was speaking to him through these forgotten tokens, pointing the way not just through its tangled paths, but through a story long buried beneath time and sorrow. The rain fell more gently now, as if the sky wished not to disturb this unfolding tale. Corin set the charm in his pocket beside the stone and parchment and stepped from the bench's shadow. The path to the right seemed darker, choked with brambles and shadowed by towering trees. The path to the left, though narrow, was lined with wild flowers, their colors vivid even beneath the mist. A soft breeze carried the faintest scent of lavender and rain-wet grass. Trusting his heart and the garden's signs, Corin chose the left, and the garden seemed to sigh with approval. Each step took him closer to the heart of the story, and he felt the presence of Elia's wish, of her journey, of the love that had placed that stone beneath the ancient tree so long ago. And so Corin walked, his spirit steady, his promise to the garden firm. The night deepened, the garden's magic thick as the mist, and the path ahead glimmered with possibility. The path of wildflowers seemed to brighten as Corin walked, as though each bloom remembered the touch of footsteps that had passed this way before, long ago. The mist thinned just enough for moonlight to filter through the trees, casting silver patterns across the ground like threads in a great living tapestry. Corin's boots, damp with rain and soft earth, made no sound as he moved, as if the garden itself wished to keep this journey secret and sacred. The small wooden bird charm felt warm against his palm whenever he touched it, a quiet reminder that the garden's magic was leading him true. And as he walked, the air shifted. The fragrance of lavender and moss gave way to something older, deeper, the scent of cedarwood and ancient stone, of places that remembered. The path opened at last into a glade he had never seen before, though He had wandered the garden's edges many times in his young life. At the center of the clearing stood a fallen archway, its stones worn smooth by time, its carvings faded but still faintly visible in the moonlight. Stars, moons, and birds, the same symbols that marked the comb, the parchment, the charm. Corin stepped closer, running his fingers over the cool stone. The arch had once been a gate, he realized, a threshold that might have marked the beginning of Elia's journey, or perhaps its end. Beneath the arch, half buried in moss and earth, he found traces of an ancient path. Stones laid in careful rows, now broken and scattered, leading deeper still into the garden's heart. Corin knelt and touched the stones, feeling their history hum beneath his fingertips. He imagined Elia walking this path, the night air cool against her skin, her heart full of hope or fear, or both. He imagined the one who had placed the wish beneath the tree, standing here too, watching, waiting, praying the garden would do what they could not. The rain returned, soft and steady, and Corin lifted his face to it, letting it wash away his doubts. He knew now that the garden wanted him to see this through, to follow the trail where it led, to carry not just the tokens, but the memory, the promise, the love that had been left in its care. So Corin rose, his steps light and sure, and crossed beneath the fallen arch. The ancient path waited, and beyond it, the truth of Elia's story. The garden whispered all around him, rain and wind and leaf and stone, and he listened with all his heart. Beyond the fallen arch, the garden changed. The wildflowers gave way to ancient trees, their trunks wide as cottages, their roots weaving in and out of the earth like great, slumbering serpents. The stones of the hidden path glimmered faintly beneath the moss, as if remembering the countless feet that once walked upon them. Corin stepped carefully, feeling as though he were moving through a memory, a place where time itself had slowed to a hush, where even the rain seemed to fall more gently, as if unwilling to disturb the sacred quiet. The scent of cedar and earth grew stronger, mingled now with the faint sweetness of forgotten blooms hidden beneath the ferns. Every so often, he caught sight of small tokens half buried in the undergrowth, a bead of polished amber, a rusted key, a broken ring. Each one, he knew, a piece of someone's wish, left for the garden to guard. As he walked, Corin's mind filled with wonder. What hopes had been placed here? What promises? What hearts had whispered their dreams beneath these towering trees, trusting the garden to hold them safe? And always he thought of Elia, the name carved at the statue's base, the comb, the charm, all signs pointing toward a story not yet finished. The path twisted, then rose gently toward a low hill where the trees parted, revealing a small clearing bathed in silver light. At its center stood a stone well, its rim lined with carvings so worn that they seemed part of the stone itself. The well was ancient, older than the village, older perhaps than the garden, and it hummed with quiet magic, the kind that asks no price but patience, the kind that waits. Corin approached slowly, drawn by the well's deep silence. He peered into its shadowed depths, and though he could not see the bottom, he felt its presence like a heartbeat, steady and sure. Upon the rim lay a single feather, pale as moonlight, resting where no breeze could have placed it. Gently he picked it up, feeling its softness, and as he did, the garden seemed to lean closer, as if sharing its breath with him. Corin understood then that the well had been a place of wishes too, a place where Elia, or the one who loved her, had come to ask the garden's help. The well, the path, the tokens, they were all pieces of the same promise, woven together by hope and waiting for someone at last to listen. And so, with the feather tucked safely beside the comb and charm, Corin knelt at the well's edge. He whispered to it, not with grand words, but with the quiet vow of his heart, I will follow. I will see this wish kept. And in the stillness, the garden seemed to answer, not with voice, but with the soft sigh of wind through leaves, the gentle fall of rain, the peaceful hush of night. Corin lingered by the ancient well, feeling the weight of the feather in his pocket, alongside the comb, the charm, the parchment, and the stone, each token a quiet voice calling him onward. The rain softened to a mist that clung to the air like breath, and the world around him felt suspended as though the garden itself waited with him, watching, listening. He rose slowly, his boots brushing the moss that covered the stones beneath his feet, and let his gaze wander beyond the well's circle. There, almost hidden beneath a curtain of ivy, he saw what he had not seen before, a narrow trail barely more than a thread of worn earth and scattered stones, winding away into the deeper shadows of the garden. The feather, he thought, the feather was a sign laid at the well's edge to point him toward this hidden way. With a steady heart, Corin stepped through the veil of ivy and followed the trail, the hush of the garden deepening around him. The air here was cooler, the light dim, but the path beneath his feet was sure, as if it remembered being walked long ago. The ground sloped gently downward, and the trees grew close, their roots knotted together like hands clasped in ancient promise. Every so often, Corin glimpsed traces of those who had come before, a scrap of faded ribbon tangled in a branch, the gleam of a coin long tarnished by time, a mark upon a stone that might have been a name, now worn smooth by rain and years. And always the garden whispered around him, the soft rustle of leaves, the tender drip of water from high branches, the hum of earth that had cradled countless wishes. At last, the path opened into a hollow, hidden so deep within the garden that even the moon's light barely reached it. At its center stood a tree unlike any Corin had seen, its bark pale as bone, its branches twisted in graceful arcs, its leaves silvered as if dusted with starlight. Beneath its canopy lay a circle of stones arranged with care, their centers hollowed as though once filled with offerings now lost to time. Corin stepped forward, awe filling him, and placed the feather gently at the tree's roots, beside the comb, the charm, the parchment, and the stone. He knelt in the quiet, knowing in his heart that this was the garden's oldest secret, a place where wishes had once been spoken with such hope that even time dared not erase them. The rain fell softly again, blessing the hollow, and Corin whispered his promise once more. I will remember. I will keep the wish safe. And in the deep hush that followed, the garden seemed to breathe with him, its magic wrapping around him like a cloak, as if to say, you are part of this story now. In the deep quiet of the hollow, with the silver-leaf trees standing watch and the soft rain weaving its gentle song, Corin remained kneeling, his eyes tracing the ancient stones encircling the tree's base. The garden seemed to hold its breath with him, as though the very earth waited for what would come next. His fingers, damp and trembling with wonder rather than cold, brushed the moss between the stones, and there, just beneath the green veil, he felt it, a seam in the earth, as though the garden itself had once opened its heart, and now invited him to look within. With great care, Corin lifted the moss and cleared away the soft soil, revealing a shallow hollow cradling something wrapped in oilskin, worn but intact through the years of rain and root and time. His heart beat loud in his ears as he unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a small wooden box, its surface carved with the same crescent moons and tiny stars that marked every token he'd found, its edges smoothed by loving hands long ago. With reverence, Corin opened the box, and within lay a letter, its paper yellowed but miraculously whole, and a locket, its chain fine as spider silk, its surface engraved with the name Elia. Corin lifted the letter and unfolded it, his eyes scanning the words, written in a hand that spoke of both strength and sorrow. If you find this, know I loved her more than breath itself. This garden was our meeting place, our promise kept beneath the moonlight. I could not bring her home, but I leave this, so the garden will remember, so the garden will guide her or those who come after. Let no wish of love be truly lost. Tears mixed with the rain upon Corin's cheeks as he held the letter and the locket close. He felt as if the garden's spirit, the spirit of that love and longing, had wrapped around him like the branches of the great tree. The forgotten wish was no longer forgotten. The promise made beneath these silvered leaves lived again, carried now in Corin's heart. He understood at last that the garden's magic was not in granting wishes with sudden wonder, but in keeping them safe, until someone someday would remember and see them through. Corin sat quietly beneath the tree as dawn's first light softened the sky. The rain eased to a hush, and the garden, at peace, seemed to sigh with contentment. The boy who had entered as a seeker would leave as a keeper of the garden's oldest story, ready to share it, ready to honor it, ready to remind the world that no true wish is ever lost, only waiting. Corin remained beneath the silver-leaf tree as the pale light of dawn filtered through the branches, casting soft patterns upon the damp earth. The locket rested in his palm, its weight small, but its meaning vast, as though it carried the love of generations within its delicate shell. The garden, now washed clean by the night's gentle rain, glowed with quiet pride, its blossoms lifted toward the morning as if in silent applause for the boy who had listened, who had seen, who had understood. Corin felt no rush to leave this sacred place. He sat still, his back resting against the ancient trunk, and let the garden's peace fill him, his heart beating in time with the soft rustle of leaves, the drip of water from branch to root, the sigh of wind weaving through the boughs like an old song. In that quiet, Corin's thoughts turned to what came next. The garden had shared its secret, had entrusted its oldest wish into his care, but wishes, he knew, were not meant to be locked away in hidden hollows, no matter how lovingly guarded. They were meant to grow, to bloom, to find their way into the world where they might become truth. He looked again at the letter, the ink faded, but the words bright in his heart. Let no wish of love be truly lost. That was the task before him, not simply to remember, but to honor. He would take the locket, the charm, the comb, and the tokens of this long-ago promise, and he would share their story. He would remind the village of the garden's true magic, of the hopes it cradled, of the promises it kept long after those who made them were gone. Rising at last, Corin felt the garden's blessing in the warm breeze that stirred his hair, in the soft rain that fell like a benediction upon his shoulders, He glanced once more at the silver tree, at the circle of stones, at the hidden path that had brought him here, and then, with steps light but certain, he began the walk back through the garden's heart. The trail seemed clearer now, the signs of those who had come before shining through the mist and moss. The garden's hush was no longer one of waiting, but of peace, a promise fulfilled, a secret kept, a wish remembered. And as Corin passed beneath the fallen arch and into the light of day, the garden behind him seemed to whisper its thanks. Its hope carried on the breeze like a song meant just for him. The garden's embrace lingered around Corin as he made his way back along the ancient paths, the tokens of Elia's story tucked safely against his heart. The rain had eased into a fine silvery mist that clung to the grass and glistened on every leaf and petal, as if the garden itself wept gentle tears of joy. With each step, Corin felt the world grow brighter, as though the very air had been changed by the remembering of that old wish, by the promise he now carried. The village rooftops appeared through the trees, their chimneys just beginning to curl smoke into the soft dawn sky. And as Corin crossed the threshold of the garden's gate, he paused, looking back one last time at the place that had shared its deepest secret with him. The silver tree's highest branches caught the first true rays of morning, and for a heartbeat they glowed like fire, like hope reborn. When Corin reached the village square, the world was waking. Shopkeepers swept their doorsteps. The baker's oven sent warm scents drifting through the streets. Children's voices began to rise like birdsong. Corin moved quietly through it all, but those he passed could see a change in him, a gentleness in his eyes, a strength in his step. He went to the elder's house, where stories of the village's past were kept in books and memory. There he laid out the tokens, the comb carved with stars and moons, the small bird charm, the letter with its fading ink, the locket bearing Elia's name. And as the elder listened, Corin spoke of the garden, of the wish left in its care, of the love that had waited so long to be remembered. The story spread like the rain song upon the rooftops. People came to hear, to see the tokens, to walk again to the garden's edge with new eyes and new hearts. The garden, once a place of forgotten paths, became a place of pilgrimage, where old promises were honored and new wishes were made, not in haste, but with quiet reverence. And Corin, the boy who had listened, became known as the garden's keeper, the one who reminded the village that no true wish is ever lost, that love planted in hope blooms even after the longest night. The days that followed were filled with a gentle wonder, as if the garden's old magic had seeped to the very heart of the village. And when the rains came again, soft, steady, and sweet-smelling, the people knew it was time. On an evening draped in mist and silver moonlight, the villagers gathered at the garden's edge, each carrying a small token of their own. A ribbon from a mother's sewing basket, a charm once given in friendship, a letter folded with trembling hands, a stone marked with a single hopeful word. Corin led them, the keeper of the story now woven into the garden's soul. His hands cradled the locket of Elia, the comb, the charm, the letter, treasures no longer hidden but honored. The path, once overgrown and forgotten, now welcomed them, the wild flowers bending gently as if in greeting, the ancient trees standing proud and silent. They walked together beneath the archway, through the hush of the garden's oldest trails, until at last they reached the hollow where the silver tree rose like a guardian of the night. The rain fell softly, blessing the gathering, each drop carrying the garden's quiet joy. The villagers formed a circle beneath the tree's shining leaves, and Corin stepped forward, his voice low but sure. He spoke of the wish that had been made so long ago, of the promise kept safe by the garden, of the love that had waited beyond time. He placed the tokens at the tree's roots once more, not hidden this time, but offered openly, so that the garden and all who came after would remember. One by one, the villagers laid down their own tokens, their hopes, their sorrows, their dreams, trusting the garden to hold them gently as it had held Elia's. As the rain continued to fall, the garden seemed to breathe with them, its magic alive in the air, in the earth, in the silvered branches that stretched toward the sky. The garden of forgotten wishes was forgotten no longer. Its paths would be tended, its stories shared, its promises honored. And Corin, once a boy who entered the garden seeking wonder, now stood as its keeper, its friend, its voice. He knew that the garden's true gift was not in granting wishes with sudden magic, but in holding them safe, in waiting with quiet patience until hearts were ready to remember, to listen, to keep them alive. The soft rain fell through the night, gentle as a lullaby, as the villagers slowly made their way back to their homes, their hearts lightened by the sharing of the garden's secret. But Corin stayed behind, beneath the silver-leafed tree, feeling the weight of the night's wonder settle over him like a warm cloak. He sat quietly, his back against the ancient trunk, listening to the steady rhythm of the rain, the quiet murmur of the garden, the soft breathing of the earth. The garden seemed content now, its promise fulfilled, its oldest wish remembered. But Corin knew that the garden's story was not finished, that it never would be, so long as there were those willing to listen, to hope, to trust. And so he stayed, watching the rain bead and drip from the silvered leaves, watching the tokens glisten at the tree's roots, watching the garden glow softly in the moonlight like a dream made real. In that quiet, Corin felt something shift within him, as though the garden's magic had taken root in his heart. He understood now that the garden's true gift was not just the keeping of wishes, but the weaving of them into the lives of those who came to its paths. The way it wrapped each story, each hope, in the gentle strength of its branches and blossoms, holding them safe until the world was ready to remember. The silver tree creaked softly in the breeze, its branches swaying like arms that had held countless dreams, and Corin laid his hand upon its trunk, feeling its quiet pulse beneath his fingers. He made a promise then, not aloud, but in his heart, that he would return again and again to tend the garden's paths, to listen for its secrets, to guide others who came seeking wonder or solace or hope. The night deepened, the rain song soft and steady, and Corin closed his eyes, resting beneath the silver tree as the garden kept watch. And as he drifted toward sleep, he felt as if the garden wrapped him in its quiet magic, a part of its story forever now, as much as the stones, the blossoms, the ancient paths. Somewhere beyond the trees, the first light of dawn waited, but for now, the night belonged to the garden, to the rain, and to the boy who had listened. The dawn came softly, its light spilling through the garden like gold poured gently over the silver leaves of the great tree. The rain had eased at last, leaving behind a world washed clean, every petal and blade of grass glistening with drops that caught the morning sun and scattered it like stars upon the ground. Corin stirred beneath the silver tree, his eyes opening to a sky brushed with the softest hues of pink and blue, the air rich with the scent of rain and blooming earth. He rose slowly, feeling the warmth of the first rays of sunlight upon his face, and looked around at the garden, a place no longer hidden, no longer forgotten, but alive with new promise. The tokens of the trees' roots shone in the dawn's light, and the garden seemed to hum with peace, as if it too was greeting a new day with quiet joy. Corin reached into his pocket and drew out a small stone, smooth and round, one he had carried since he was very young. It was nothing grand, no carving, no mark of magic, just a stone that had always brought him comfort on long walks and stormy nights. He held it in his hand for a moment, feeling its familiar weight, and then knelt to place it gently among the other tokens of the tree's roots. It was his gift to the garden, a promise, a part of himself left behind as a symbol of his vow. And as he set it down, the breeze stirred the leaves above, the silvered branches swaying as if in blessing. The garden had kept so many wishes safe, and now, with Corin's small offering, it would begin to gather new ones, hopes for the future, dreams to be guarded with the same quiet strength as the old. He stood for a long while, watching the garden in the morning light, listening to the soft murmur of the breeze, the song of the waking birds, the gentle drip of water from branch to earth. The garden's magic, he knew, was not in grand displays or sudden wonders, but in its patient care, its endless promise to remember, to protect, to hold each wish close until the world was ready for it. And Corin, the boy who had once wandered the garden's edges in search of a story, now walked its paths as its keeper, its friend, its voice. The garden's tale would go on as long as there were hearts willing to listen, as long as there were dreams left at its roots, as long as rain fell soft upon its leaves. So rest now, my dear one, beneath the song of the rain and the promise of the garden. The wishes are safe, the story is told, and the garden will keep watch through the night